Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Leslie. We've known each other for almost 7 or 8 years now, and we're trying to work together to possibly do some of the research that is, I feel, is key to helping out our climate issue. And we're trying to actually place some of the fabrics that she's working with up in a true environment where we feel that it'll actually have some great impact up on the Arctic Ocean. And I've been going to both poles, north and south, for quite some time. It's been a remarkable journey. I didn't think that I was going to get into climate change ever. It's sort of happened by accident, and certainly fun. So this is an interesting photo. This was taken in 1972. It's called the Blue Marble. You guys have seen it. It's probably the most published picture of our ever. It was taken by one of the last Apollo trips, I think Apollo 17, maybe. But you know, I remember in 1972 when that picture was taken and it was published. I looked at it and really had a good idea of, wow, this is what our planet looks like when the sun is fully hitting it. And you know, I didn't know that we were able to destroy our planet that quickly from 72. So you guys are our future. And we need to do something about it now, and hopefully you guys can come up with some ways that we can curb our carbon use and try to go with more renewables. July 2015 was the hottest month ever recorded. 2015 is on track to be the hottest year ever. There was also shows a little bit of diagram global temperature by decades and how it is unanimous that we're getting warmer. Also, the global carbon emissions through fossil fuels has been increasing since the Industrial Revolution. And this is the cause of it, man-made pollution that we're seeing and doing. This is sort of a comparison of our CO2 concentration as well as the temperature, and just shows a graph on, you know, our CO2 emissions and then our temperature range going up as well. And these are all the things that are, where do the greenhouse gases come from? There's coal plants, industrial process, there's farming, there's fertilization, there's transportation, there's all these different things that are causing it. And I'm just a skier. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, and I've been going out on the planet, going to far reaches of the planet, just going to ski, and I love skiing. I own a company called Ice Axe Expeditions, and what we do is human-powered skiing. So we climb everything and then we ski down. So it's really important for me to be able to do more human-powered. I don't use helicopters, I don't use snowmobiles. It's just, I'm usually on a sailboat or a boat, and I get off the boat and climb up and then ski back down. It's just, all I like to do is leave a set of ski tracks. And I've skied all over the world, Svalbard, Antarctica. I leave for Antarctica in another week and a half. I'm really looking forward to it. That's my 19th trip to the Antarctic Peninsula, my 38th trip to Antarctica. And I've been going back and back every year, and I've been seeing a lot of differences. I also bring my paddleboard with me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with stand-up paddling. I love to paddle. This is actually up in Svalbard, and this is actually in Antarctica on a beautiful day. And it's just a great way to see the environment. You're able to see the seals and the penguins through the water, and the water's quite clear too. So it's a great way to just see things. But I guess I sort of started my engineering early. This was early 2003, January 2003. I designed what they now call the ice bike. And it was a bike to go across Antarctica. I was going for 3 weeks, and I wanted to go around the Heritage Range, and I wanted to see if I could do this trip across the heavy snow. And I put a sled to it. I actually designed it so it would be attached to the back axle, which was a bad decision. Much better to actually attach it to the seat post. And I made these big fat tires. I beveled the tires. I used front fork suspension systems and a seat post suspension so I could go across the ice. And what I didn't realize is I got hit with an atypical storm off the Weddell Sea and grounded me for 5 days straight. I couldn't move. I was hit with 150-mile-an-hour winds. I had to go outside the tent every 2 or 3 hours to dig myself out so I wasn't buried alive. And for 5 days I had to do this. And so I started seeing, and as you don't know, Antarctica gets about 12 inches of snow a year, and I got hit with a 32-inch storm. So as I'm going to Antarctica, I'm seeing different weather patterns happen, and it's sort of alarming to me to see this. But my first trip to Antarctica was in 1999. I wanted to go climb and ski and snowboard the highest peak in Antarctica. And so I went to the Vincent Massif. It's 16,077 feet. This is on our summit ridge. I ended up going over to climb this mountain. This is the sixth highest peak called Mount Shin. And then the second highest peak is right over here called Mount Tyree. And I named my son after that one. And I'd like to go back and ski it with him at some point in time in the future. After that trip to Vincent, it was, we were hit with another atypical storm of like, I think 30 inches of snow again. So I had visions of us skiing ice and technical tools to be able to get down, and we had Antarctic powder. So that was sort of alarming to me. I thought you said there was only 12 inches a year and we got 30 inches in one storm. But anyway, about 8 months after that first trip, I was asked to guide a blind gentleman and a deaf gentleman across Antarctica, from the coast of Antarctica, 787 miles to the South Pole. So I had never done anything like this before. So through this process, I learned a lot about myself. First of all, I had to figure out a way to keep him safe. He doesn't have use of his eyes. And then his sight guide, John Cook, the guy next to him, he's deaf. So I have a blind gentleman and a deaf gentleman, and I'm gonna go do something that I've never, ever done before. So we set off, and I tried a few different things. I had a bell on the back of my sled, and I would be skiing the first hour, I think, and I looked behind me, and Miles is the name of the gentleman who's blind. He's off skiing into the abyss. The wind was so strong, he couldn't hear the bell behind me, so I had to go unhook myself from the sled, go chase him down, bring him back, and then I had to ski next to him for 787 miles. And what there was in the snow, there was things called sastrugi that's caused by wind. And so he would trip over the sastrugi pieces. So what I would do is sort of push him around it, or I'd pull him around the sastrugi so he wouldn't fall. And I really have to give it to him. I tried to ski for about 100 yards, and I fell over 3 or 4 times. So, and I shut my eyes and tried to do it. So I really had to give it to him. And for him to be successful, I had to keep him safe. You know, if he got frostbite or injured during the trip, it was a no-win situation, especially for me, but also for him too. I didn't want that to happen. So there's a lot of things that you have to go through to make sure that he is safe. And this is a gentleman, Ernest Shackleton. He's one of my heroes. And Shackleton was a turn-of-the-century explorer. In 1909, he got within 97 miles of the South Pole and had the ability to say, oh my gosh, we don't have enough food and fuel. We can't continue. We need to go back. These guys at this time would take 4 years of their life to go on to mount an expedition like this. And it would take almost 1.5 years for them to sail from England to get to the right spot. They'd winter over and then start the expedition, and then have to return and then pretty much winter over again and then actually head back. So a lot of respect for these guys. In 1914 through 1916, we're coming into the 100-year anniversary of Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. What Shackleton tried to do, he tried to come into the Weddell Sea here, the Roni Ice Shelf, get to about Berkner Island, and then he wanted to ski to the South Pole and then down to McMurdo Sound. There's actually permanent ice here and permanent ice here. A lot of people don't realize that the ice expands around Antarctica almost 500 miles every winter. And they just had some tests, or some researchers have some studies saying this year was actually a pretty big ice year. It was one of the biggest ice years they've had in about 25 years. But what Shackleton wanted to come into the Roni Ice Shelf for the Weddell Sea, and he wanted to winter over Berkner Island or Leverett Glacier, somewhere around there, and then start his journey the next spring. What happened, I'll tell the story real quick. The boat came in, crushed the boat. He camped next to the boat as the ice moving out to sea for 2 months. Finally, the boat sunk right off of Elephant Island right here. had a couple rowboats. They took all their supplies to Elephant Island, dropped off 22 men, and then Shackleton sails from Elephant Island all the way off the map to a place called the island of South Georgia, 800 miles away. Got to the wrong side of the island, had to climb over, had no climbing gear, no food, no tents. Took 36 hours to go climb over the island to get to the other side where there was some whaling stations. They ended up getting to the wrong whaling station, which was Fortuna, and then climbing back up the hill to get to the right one, which was Stromness. It was a complete epic journey. Worsley, the navigator, was able to find this needle in a haystack, the island 800 miles away, was able to navigate in a little tiny 20-foot rowboat. So they end up sailing about 1,700 miles back to Punta Arenas, Chile. Took 6 months for the money to get to the Queen of England to say, hey, I got men stuck in Antarctica. Please send money so I can buy a boat. 6 months for money to get back, and then he set sail. He bought a boat and set sail to go down to rescue all his men, and the boat got crushed off of Cape Horn. He returns to Punta Arenas. He asked the Chilean Navy, please, can I borrow a boat? So they gave him a tugboat that really wasn't even suitable to leave harbor, and he was going all the way to Antarctica across the roughest sea in the world, the Drake Passage, to go rescue every one of his men. They lived on penguin and seal for 22 months. He rescued every one of those men. So he's one of my heroes. 2007, I wanted to go see if I could do the journey that he intended to do. I got dropped off right by Berkner Island, and I skied 47 days, 737 miles to the South Pole. And that was probably from here all the way to here. The miles route with the blind guy, we left from a place called Hercules Inlet, and that's 787 miles to the South Pole, and that took me 62 days. And so you don't realize, but you really, on these polar expeditions, you wear the same underwear every day. You basically, every week you turn it inside out or right side in, and then another week would go by and then you change it up. I only carry the things that you absolutely need. You only carry food and fuel. You wear the same clothes. I cut my toothbrush in half. I cut labels out of clothing. It's very, very important that you only carry the necessities. So I do that with my Arctic trips too, but I just wanted to give you a map of Antarctica to see. I didn't take a boat like Shackleton. I fly in with a Aleutian aircraft and land on an ice runway, which is pretty remarkable in its own right. And then we took a DC-3 with skis. You can see the skis down here. And we got dropped off at basically the Filchner ice shelf. And this is me and my client. And you can see these aren't mountains behind. This is actually upheaval of ice. Ice is moving, crevasses are forming, and you can see our tracks as we come around here. And what I do is, you can see these tracks right here. I actually run ahead and set up a tripod with the camera, and then I run back and get in the camera and the picture takes. But you can actually see the crevasses behind us. During that journey, I think I fell into 4 different crevasses up to my chest and was able to extract myself, luckily, and was able to continue the journey. But this is a good picture, because if you look in the background, you could see how the ice undulates. And every day, I would gain more and more altitude. And within the first, I'd say, 2 weeks, we gained over 9,000 feet or 3,000 meters. And then you're up on the polar plateau. And from there, it's pretty much a straight shot right to the pole. So it was an uphill, but it wasn't that much. It undulates slightly. You can see the sastrugi in the ice. We had a lot of whiteout conditions. A lot of the time, you couldn't see anything in front of you. I had to use ways of navigation. Usually when the sun is out, you can use your body almost like a compass, or basically your shadow just comes around your body and you're able to navigate exactly where you know where south is. When it's white out, it becomes difficult. You can see I have a little flag that's taped to my pole, and I use that as a navigation tool. I can actually get my compass out and find out where south is. And I'm able to, even if I can't see my skis or my hand, I can put that up to my face and actually see the direction that wind is going. And then a few times a day, I'll double check it with a GPS coordinate. But most of the time, I'm just got my compass out and I'm using the wind socks to be able to navigate. Another picture of us navigating. You can see me pulling my compass out all the time. Everything that we need is in that sled. And we use some, I mean, technology has come a long way, and this is actually 2007. I have a little iPhone and a Iridium satellite phone, and I can update my Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of good stuff every day. And, you know, so I can be in touch with the outside world, and sponsors can follow and get some media out of it. So that was part of our daily process. At the end of the day, you know, you're so exhausted from skiing 14, 15 hours a day. We were still doing, you know, dispatches and blogs and stuff like that. And you can see I have tape on my nose. That's not because I injured myself. That is more preventative maintenance. And what I have to do is I would be sweating, and I'd put my goggles on, and I'd have to take my goggles off, and my goggles would freeze to my face and pull about 15 layers of skin off my nose and my cheeks. So I would just put tape there to make sure that I didn't get taken. But after 47 days, and we made it to the South Pole, I had a few injuries. I think before that, I mean, on the way, I think I got snowblind. I also had to pull one of my molars out. I was eating a piece of chocolate. So imagine you living in a freezer. Everything around you, all the food is frozen. And I just had a little tiny piece of chocolate, and I shoved it into my mouth, and I ended up breaking a tooth. And I had to pull it out with like a Leatherman tool or a needle nose plier. So I had a bunch of gauze there, and I ended up getting snowblind because my goggles froze shut, and I couldn't actually navigate for several hours. So I ended up, for the last 3 days, I think I just had to sort of walk by braille to get there. But it was, after about 5 or 6 days, I was able to continue. So this was me before the trip started. I weighed about 217 pounds. As I'm going into these trips, I'm trying to gain a bunch of weight. I'm actually eating, you know, 3 or 4 things of Ben & Jerry's and a couple chicken rotisseries, and you know, I even donuts. I don't even like donuts, and I eat fattening food because I want to try to gain some weight. But when I got there, I weighed 174, and that's why I have the patch on, because I was snowblind. You can see I have a little bit of swollenness in my cheek from pulling my tooth out, and I don't bring a comb, so I had to shave. My head was all dreaded, so I had to shave my head as well. But you can see I look like a concentration camp victim. But in 2010, a friend of mine, Grant Corrigan, is on the left, and his wife, Shauna, came to me and asked me to do an expedition to the South Pole. And this is another guy that in March of 2010, I'm sorry, this is 2012, we actually did the trip, but 2010, he was in a snowmobile accident in the Sonora Mountains of California. And he was trying to do a big, huge gap jump, or just jump with a snowmobile. And he overshot the gap jump and landed 150 feet straight down to the snow, and broke his L6 and L7, which is his lumbar 6 and 7. And the doctors said he would never walk again. And his wife, he was married to Shauna about 2 months prior to that accident, and she said she would stand by him when he couldn't stand for himself. So basically, Grant came to me and said, hey, I want to do a trip to the South Pole. And so we had to come up with ways and engineer a way for him to get to the pole. So what we did is we engineered a thing called a sit ski. And so we went through several different models. We went through ones with suspension and non-suspension and skinny skis. And so the most durable one we found had a really rigid body. We used normal skis with no skins or anything. And we even tested with him trying to push with a sled. And then the most efficient way is truly without a sled. And you think about skiing, and you think about snow, and you think about gliding. Well, up on the polar plateau, it's so cold, it's probably minus 40 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit. They converge at the same place. You think these crystals are so large and they're so cold that there's no glide. It's, as Grant put it, I think it's like styrofoam and Velcro is how he described it. It'd be like trying to push across this carpet on skis. So you can imagine the effort that it would take to go 76 miles across the polar plateau. And what was really interesting for me as a guide, I had to make sure, just like I did with Miles, I had to make sure that he was safe. How am I going to get someone who can't feel his feet get him across the South Pole, because he wouldn't be able to tell me if his feet are getting cold. I certainly can tell when my feet are getting cold. I would say, okay, my feet are getting cold. I need to jump around or do something about it, or get in a tent, or put heat warmers or something like that. He can't tell me. So we had to design thermocouplers that are temperature gauges that we taped to his toes, and we ran cables up his leg, and then we had a little temperature gauge on his stomach. And so every hour I would check that out. At one time during the trip, it got to 27 degrees. That's below freezing. So we had to set up the tent, stop right away, and we came up with some other methods. We had other ways to be able to problem solve to make sure that we were able to get safely. One of the things was we got him out of the boots. We put some footbed warmers and some other hand warmers on his feet, and we actually used what's called an elephant's foot, which is basically half a sleeping bag. You cut a sleeping bag in half and you just put it on while he's pushing. So both those things really worked, and we were able to continue. I was the lead guide on the thing. And what Grant wanted to do, this is the pole itself, and the original 12 Antarctic treaty countries are flags that are displayed right at the ceremonial pole. He wanted to get out. He's actually healing. He trains about 8 or 9 hours a day, and he wanted to ski the last 100 feet to the South Pole. And so I got him out of the sit ski. I'm standing next to him, make sure he doesn't fall over. He's skiing. He's crying as he's walking through the flags, and he just looks at me and he says, "I wish my wife was here to see this beautiful moment of my life." And we secretly flew her in to the South Pole. So we actually, she flew in. She actually walked up and took her goggles off and said, "Welcome to the South Pole." And we made a movie about it. Called The Push. It'll be out this fall. Morgan Freeman's narrating it. We're trying to get an Academy screening, and it's going to be in Sundance and a few other things. So it's called The Push, and so keep an eye out for it. Last year, I was involved in an expedition. Actually, this was 2 expeditions in one, because we were flying into that ice runway at Union Glacier, and we were going to take a 6x6 Arctic truck all the way across Antarctica. And this was going to be interesting because I've always flown, I've skied, I've done all these different things across Antarctica. But this trip was actually, we're going to drive all the way to the South Pole and then all the way down to the Filchner ice shelf. And that was where we were going to start, because remember, this is all sea ice. That's considered land, and that's all sea ice when we're looking at that other picture of Antarctica. So we're considering this is the coast of Antarctica, even though there's about 130 feet of ice between that and ground, but you could see a couple crevasses and you could see some water down there, so they call it land. So that's where we actually drove across, and we were doing some climate change research. I was going with a young lad from Yale, and he was 18 years old. And he had been on 3 other expeditions to the North Pole with me, but I've been sort of his mentor, and we were doing some really cool science work. We were collecting isotopes, as well as doing a bunch of core samples as well, which was a lot of fun. So here's Parker on the left, and I'm on the right, and we're just having a little dinner in the tent and talking about our day. And you can see this is the truck that we took. And how rough it was to cruise across, and I was of course up front to make sure if we ran into any crevasses and the wheels fell into any crevasses, we had a winch up here and I could make an anchor and we could get it out. So we really put a lot of thought into traveling across this remote tundra. And then we put a box in the back, and a lot of the guys, even Parker, had to stay in the back for a lot of it, and that would have been miserable. I always said I had to be up front because make sure we didn't fall in any crevasses. But we stopped I'd say every 80 miles, and we dug big, huge pits. That certainly got you warm, even in super cold temperatures, and that was a lot of work. And also we did core samples, which we had a boring core displacement tool that we were able to get core samples. And then we were putting them in Pelican cases to make sure that we could collect the data. A lot of the time, it doesn't show in this picture, but we would have huge hazmat suits on to make sure that we were doing it accurately and weren't contaminating the samples at all. So I think we had some hazmat suits, and we were wearing gloves and stuff like that. So it was always interesting to collect data. But then we started from the Leverett, and it was about 438 miles. And we ended up doing that trip in 18 days, 4 hours and 43 minutes. The previous record was 24 days. So we pretty much smashed the record, and it still stands today. So certainly had a great time doing it with Parker, and I've had other clients that have come back to me and said, hey, I want to go beat the record. And I basically say, hey, you need to raise money for charity or come up with some sort of cause to do it, or I'm not taking you. And that's really my policy with almost all my trips. And then in about a week and a half, I'm going to sail from Ushuaia, Argentina, which is in the Beagle Channel, and we'll sail 600 miles to the western side of the peninsula. And I operate Ice Axe Expeditions, which is we do human-powered skiing, and we'll ski in the Antarctic Peninsula. And we have to cross the Drake Passage. I've done 32 crossings. 16 have been pretty much Drake Lake, and 16 have been Drake Shake. And I'd say 4 of those 16 that were Drake Shake were hurricane force winds. So I'm hoping that it's a smooth one. Everyone else is hoping that there's a big one because they want to have a big storm across the Drake and the boat's super safe, but I'd rather it be smooth. I do live feeds from Antarctica to classrooms in the United States and Canada where I've pioneered the technology. So this is another thing that I've done, which is I've tested the boundaries and the parameters of where these Inmarsat, Iridium and Inmarsat locators can go from. They go down from almost 70 degrees south and almost 70 degrees north. So I can actually do a live feed from northern Greenland or middle of Greenland and all the way down to the Antarctic Peninsula. This Adelie penguin just happened to just show up on cue. Someone said, cue the Adelie penguin, and he jumps up right in front of me. And I have a camera, and I'm talking to students. And of course, the students are screaming and yelling. And it's just a great learning experience. I love seeing how the students want to be engaged, and they're able to ask me questions live. How old is that penguin that's pecking at your boot? Oh, well, it's about 6 weeks old. It's going to take another few weeks for it to lose all its feathers before it can go hunt for itself. So it's a very cool interactive stuff. I really love doing the ones down in Antarctica and also up in the Brazilian Amazon. I do some trips up there, and I'll have my guides collect a giant river turtle, an anaconda, a sloth, and some bullet ants, and then I'll have some students even sometimes with me, and we'll pull that out to be able to interact with the students. It's quite fun. And on this pedestal, you can actually see the BGAN satellite communicator. I can put everything in my backpack and carry it to the top of Everest or just on shore. A few penguins around. There's the boat there. So I can have a high-speed connection pretty much anywhere on the planet. And use solar panels to charge it and all that kind of good stuff in a penguin rookery. But the beauty of the Antarctic Peninsula is unsurmounted. I mean, it's just total beauty. These glaciers are calving. There's about 7 or 8 that are calving at an alarming rate. Most of them are on the eastern side of that Antarctic Peninsula. I go more on the west. There's more mountains there. There are glaciers that are calving, but not as many as on the eastern side because the ice sheet is actually calving. There's huge icebergs the size of Rhode Island and Manhattan that are just calving off, and they're the tabular ones. They're the tabular icebergs that are calving off. So. I'd say Antarctica is about 90% of the world's ice. It's about 70% of the world's fresh water. A lot of people don't realize that. So there's a lot of glaciation that's happening. And we're taking skiers. We travel with ropes. Some of the technology I'm working with MIT with a device called Avatech. I mean, I still am not complacent. I dig snow pits. I use... I'm analyzing the snowpack. I'm using my mountain sense, I call it. I'm actually, as I'm touring up mountains, I'm looking at where the sun is hitting and where wind loading is happening and different aspects of the terrain, because I certainly don't want to have a death wish. I want to be able to travel in the mountains safely. But this is a new device that just came out about 1.5 years ago, and it's called Avatech. Some MIT graduates have a probe, and they'll put it down in the snow, and they'll find the weak layers. And not only does it detect where the weak layers is, it'll ping up the data to a website so the community can follow and learn from it as well. So it's actually a really cool tool, and I've been helping them out with some stuff, and if you want to have some more information, I can give you some more information about it after the thing. But I'm down there to check out the penguins, chinstrap penguins, These are Gen 2 penguins. It's definitely a little bit odoriferous, and these are some Gen 2s. And this is a chick and a mom or dad feeding the chick. And like I said a few minutes ago, it takes about 9 weeks for them to lose all their feathers before they can actually jump in the water and hunt for themselves.
Are penguins nice? Or do any of them, can you go up to them? Or?
Yeah, there's an Antarctic treaty that says you're supposed to be within 5 meters or 15 feet from any wildlife. But if you sit there, you're not a predator for any of those animals. They'll come right up to you. They love those little tassels on your ski jacket or your ski pants. They'll come right up to you and peck at you, and you're not supposed to pet them or anything, but they're very, very friendly. And I mean, if you skied into a bunch of penguins, I'm sure they're gonna like, you know, try to fly away or just run away and be stressed out. We try not to step in any big post holing. You know what post holing is? When you step in snow and you go all the way up to your knee. If a penguin fell in there, that would stress the penguin out and probably couldn't get out and maybe die. So I even, like when I leave a penguin rookery, I even walk backwards and sort of cover the big holes that I'm making with my boots to make sure that they're not falling in. And can you tell which one's the chick and the adult? Pretty easy. And then there's leopard seals. This is one of the only predators for the penguins, but they've really probably never run into a leopard seal before either. And so there's plenty of penguins and certainly plenty of leopard seals for them to eat. There's elephant seals. I don't always agree with these guys' dating habits. They usually have about 30 girlfriends. And then another male will approach the beach, and you can actually see how beat up this one is because it was in a fight with another male or several other males. And then what will happen is the winner will actually retain the harem. And then the other ones will go back to sea and look for another male to fight and have dominance. There's killer whales down there. We ran into a pack of about 7 of these that were attacking a seal, and they won. And it's really interesting to watch how they work together to be able to knock it off the iceberg. And that was really interesting to watch that happen. It wasn't, you know, it's life, it happens. But I find closed crevasses. This one was like 100 feet long, and it had a floor in it and also a ceiling with 35-foot walls, and you could ski all the way through it. I also do a lot of work up north. I'm going north now, and you had a picture, Dr. Fields had a picture of the North Pole with the losing of the sea ice. And I've been working up here since almost 2003. I do a lot of trips out of Svalbard. I work in Greenland, mostly down here in this western side of Greenland. The Håkon Glacier is the one that you've been seeing and chasing ice, and the one that like calved off the size of I think Manhattan, the Håkon Glacier in Ilulissat. And I've been working there the last couple summers. I also attempting this coming summer, I have a client that wants to try to sail through the Northwest Passage, and we'll probably have to go through here and here and here and then out through there. So it's going to take us about 6 weeks to do that. Amundsen 100 years ago took them 3 years. There's only been about 60 boats to ever get through. So hopefully we can. Hopefully hopefully we can't really, because I'm hoping that there's a lot of ice. The reason I'm showing you this, I work a lot up here, and in 2005, I left from a little island right there called Cape Archichesky. It took me almost a month to get across Russia, from Moscow to Krasnoyarsk to Khatanga to a little meteorological station called Golmayani, and then I finally got to this little island called Cape Archichesky. And for the first 2 days of that journey, the ice was so thin, I saw it flex in front of me. I was certainly scared. We never stopped. We just kept on going for 2 days straight. We started on March 1st, and there's only about 5 hours of light at this time of year. So every day we were getting almost 40 more minutes of light. So we had headlamps on. We couldn't really see too much. The ice was super thin. My fear was that one of us would fall in, and then it would be a chain reaction where we would continue to fall in and everybody would fall in. And And so 2006, I did the trip, and we finally did find some solid ice, and we were camped. Although when we set camp, I tried to get some ice and snow to boil in our stove to create water so we can eat and drink. And the ice that I had gotten was too fresh. It had too much salt, saline content in it, too much salt. So we basically had the condensation inside the tent. I took a pot and a pot lid and scraped the inside of the tent, and that's all we had to drink for really 2.5 days. But 2006 was the last successful attempt from Cape Archicheski. 2007, two individuals attempted to ski from the Cape to the South Pole, and both of them were rescued. One of them died. And there hasn't been anybody attempting it because, as you saw in Dr. Field's slide, there is no sea ice even in the spring. So most of the trips are going from either Greenland or Ward Hunt Island, which is right here. That's where Perry, one of our famous explorers who got to the North Pole first, that's where he left from. Cape Discovery is another place that was left, and that's actually on Greenland as well.
I'm realizing I made a terrible omission, and that is that why we care about ice, it isn't just because we love ice and skiing and the polar bears, though all that's true. About a third of global temperature rise is being attributed to this ice disappearance because we're reflecting the heat, the summer sun, so much less now that that's gone. So,
well, let me just add to that. It's actually the reflection means albedo, and what that is if there's sea ice there, it's going to reflect off the ice surface and cool our planet. When you have open water or more open water, and this is some of the observations that I've been seeing, if you have more open water, it's going to absorb. That water is saline and it's dark, and it absorbs, and it's going to change the temperature of that water. That water that's visible to the sun will warm up very quickly and will melt other ice around it and dive deep and head toward the equator. And then that warm equatorial water sort of heads toward the equator or heads toward the poles. So you have this cyclical movement of water, which is called the Gulf Stream. If you change the temperature even 0.5 degree from you have a more open water, huge impacts. And I'm talking about more intense storms. There's actually been less storms, less hurricanes coming through, or I'm sorry, less there's a hurricane season down in the Caribbean and the Atlantic. There's been less storms, but 10 times more intense. So you're seeing a lot more damage that's happening. You're also seeing Superstorm Sandy and Katrina, and so these storms are becoming more intensified because it's pulling up more warmer water from the oceans. So yeah, that's definitely happening. And so 2005, I did the Pole Track, which was an international scientific expedition. And I wanted to do something for science. I didn't want to just go and beat my chest. And so the scientists who I worked with from Alfred Wenger Institute, University of Ottawa, University of Washington, some of the most noted climate change scientists on the planet, handed me a 50-pound beacon. And remember earlier I was telling you how I cut labels out of clothing and my toothbrush in half, and how they wanted me to take 10 of these beacons with me across the Arctic Ocean? I didn't say no, but I sort of took it apart. I looked at what the instruments were, and I got together with my two friends, and we redesigned the beacon to weigh about 7 pounds as opposed to 50. And we took 3 of them, and 2 of them are still working today. One of them sunk, but really that's what I'm proud of. It's about, they all had carbon fiber tubing. They were actually more accurate than the ones that the scientists were using, because what they were doing is dropping these boxes out of airplanes to places they'd never been to. We were going somewhere what they have never been to, but we were actually installing them, setting them up, finding really good, solid, multi-year ice to put these beacons on to be able so they could collect data. And they were actually a lot more accurate than the ones that they were using prior to that. So it's really interesting, and I'm not a scientist, I'm just a knucklehead, and you just sort of say, okay, this is a GPS device, this is a Iridium modem that'll ping up data 3 times a day, this is the temperature gauge, it's simple. It's not like it's really hard to do, but now the Arctic Buoy program is using a beacon I designed. So these are the beacons. You can see, pretty simple. All the devices and all the instruments are down in here. You know, all the temperature gauges and all that is up here. This is after 52 days on the ice. And if you look, this is me on the left. We have these big, huge Himalayan down jackets that are supposed to be super puffy and keep you warm. Well, what happens, it's because we're at sea level and it's a very humid environment. So everything is soggy. I remember after about 2 weeks into the trip, took us 52 days, but 2 weeks into the trip, I was picking up my sleeping bag and put it into my sled, and I was like, why is this 3-pound sleeping bag weigh like 20 pounds? What's in it? Because I'm always putting stuff at the bottom of the sleeping bag. But I reached down to the bottom of it and it was all ice, because I had what's called a vapor barrier liner, but it must have had a hole in it or whatever, because ice had formed inside the down sleeping bag. Or it was synthetic, I'm sorry, but it had formed. So I had to cut open the sleeping bag and try to pull all the ice out to make it so it was a lot less weight, because we're trying to get rid of weight. You know, every day that we eat and we drink, we're using fuel and we're using food. Our sled should get lighter. But I was hauling around a 20-pound sleeping bag. But we also did snow depth measurements and ice depth measurements, and I try to incorporate science work with almost every trip that I do. It's really important to me to try to bring back data. And after skiing for 14, 15 hours a day, the last thing you want to do is go out there for an hour and collect data. But it was super important to make sure that we were collecting the right information and doing it accurately. Otherwise, our research and our data collection would have been worthless. But this is typical Arctic Ocean. The ice is constantly moving. And you could see some old pressure ridges here. And people ask me all the time, what's happening on the Arctic Ocean? You know, what are you seeing? And to be honest, I'm seeing a lot less multi-year ice. And when I say multi-year ice, I'm talking probably 4 to 14 years old. I consider that multi-year ice. I'm seeing second year, single year ice. I'm seeing a lot of that. It's actually gotten easier for me to ski to the pole when I do like a last degree, which is about 70 miles. So this is alarming to me. And I'm seeing huge differences up there. I'm seeing a lot more open water. I'm seeing atypical storms. It's usually pretty stable conditions. I'm seeing more storms. And it's harder for us to find a lot of that multi-year ice. And so a lot of that multi-year ice is being pushed down to the Baffin Straits and toward Canada. And so I have a few slides to share with you about that. But this is a freshwater lead, and you can see the salt crystals forming. It only takes several hours. It's probably minus 30, minus 40. So salt water freezes at 32 degrees or 0 Celsius. It freezes pretty quickly within a couple hours. When it freezes, what it does is it matrixes. It actually becomes really, really strong. And for me, I'm always on skis. I can almost ski across it within a couple hours of fresh ice freezing. So it shouldn't take that long. And here's another picture of me, actually probably the second week of the 2005 trip. And you can see how low the sun is. And you can't have any skin exposed. We have special poles we use. I designed the sleds. The sleds have Kevlar fabric on the top, so you can ski across them. You can't poke it with a knife or a ski pole. Everything has to take, we design our stoves differently. We're designing clothing with the clothing companies. We're working with boot companies to make this stuff. So this is really a lot of the fun that I have is really, it's not like you can go to REI and just say, hey, I want the polar gear, you know? So it's been fun to work with a lot of companies to try to design and make stuff that works in the polar environments. And so that's been a real pleasure to do, and it's not really good for the open market. Like a lot of people aren't buying these type of things, but they're certainly interested in the impact and the knowledge that we give. And you do see some of it implemented in some of the clothing. Like I do a lot of what's called body mapping, because I consider my activity an aerobic activity, but I'm in minus 40 degree temperatures. So you need to regulate your perspiration. So what happens is you're generating huge amounts of energy by pulling a 300-pound sled, and you're sweating, but you don't want to sweat. So I don't wear that much clothing. I wear maybe a Gore-Tex jacket, and then I wear like a wool top. And then when I stop, I put on the big down jacket to keep me warm. And that's what I do. I mean, and then I'm cold after about 5 minutes. My hands are freezing, and I want to get going again. And as soon as I'm 5 minutes into getting going, I'm actually okay. And that's my safe place. My safe place is actually when I'm moving and skiing across the ice, or in the tent, in the sleeping bag. And we run into polar bears. I think they say there's about 25,000 polar bears around the Arctic Ocean. They usually are close to the shore, and they'll go out to the sea ice looking for seals. And I've encountered quite a few of those, especially when you're on the coast, like this one trip that I did in 2005. We ran into 19 different polar bears, and they aren't very friendly, and they're not real friendly because they'd never seen humans before. They're quite fast. They probably run about 25 miles an hour. They swim real fast too. The males are really interesting. They do what's called a walking slumber. For 2 months, they'll lower their metabolism down and they'll sleepwalk. The females will dig a cave and actually give birth to 2 to 3 cubs about, I'd say, every 2 or 3 years. These cubs are probably about 2 months old, 2 to 3 months old. And they're quite cute, but I don't think they're that cute. I had a few polar bear encounters. This is what they eat. This is bearded seals, and they actually have really strong claws, and what they'll do is they'll make air holes. They can only stay underneath the ice for about 22 minutes. This is a typical picture of old consolidated multi-year ice. You can see how I call it rubbled terrain, and it might take us, an hour to go 100 yards. Here's another picture. This is near Canada, and this is a trip I did there. And you could see all this multi-year ice, and we used 2 small sleds, and I'd pull one about a quarter mile, and then I'd have to come back and get the other one. So you didn't make a lot of progress. You can see the land. That's actually Canada right there. And so for, I'd say about 40 miles, you have to go through this because of all that multi-year ice being pushed down toward Baffin Strait. So that's a good depiction of, and it's definitely a lot of hard work, and there's polar bears there. So a lot of this going on. They can be 30 feet high, and you have to really be on it. You're exhausted, you're tired. You got to make sure the sled doesn't come down and hit you in the ankle and the expedition is over. So you always have to be on. It's one of those things where your focus has to be 24/7, and you have to be focused throughout the entire expedition. You guys can actually go home tonight. You can get a book out, lie on the couch, and sort of turn off. I can't do that. And it's really one of those things where you're tapping into 12, 13, 14% of your brain, and you're completely focused. And almost to the point where you don't want it to end. It's so civilized. It's such a civilized way of life. Every day as you get up at the same time, your mind actually gets up at the same time. I don't use even an alarm clock or anything. I get up at the same time. I boil my water, I eat, I drink, I pack up my stuff, and I'm out of the tent at a certain time every day and just trying to ski across. And then you get to your goal, you get to the pole, you almost want to do more. You want to keep on going in a really strange way. That doesn't sound like, you're not really celebrating, you just want to keep on going. But typical sea ice, this is some multi-year ice. I'd say that's probably about 3 or 4 years old. You can see how it freezes and the multiple layers that keep on happening every snowstorm, and then it gets condensed. But you're jumping from lily pad to lily pad. You're using the sleds. The sleds actually float. I used a Dutch design company that makes kayaks, and we dropped these sleds from a second-story window with 250 pounds in them, so we knew that they were going to withstand some abuse. I think I told you there was Kevlar fabric, and I'll tell you one quick polar bear story. I was in the tent. We would rock, paper, scissors to see who would sleep in the middle. There was 3 of us. I was sleeping in the middle. These guys were snoring, and I couldn't believe it. And I hear a polar bear right outside the tent, really as close as me to the screen right here. And I unzipped the tent. I got a flare gun out, and I hit him square between the eyes, because he looked over at me. And he had ripped open the sled like it was tissue paper and was eating my food. So, and then these guys, I shot the bear. The bear ran away, and then these guys got up and said, "What are you doing?" So we also use dry suits. A lot of the time, you know, the leads are so long and so wide and so distant that you just put on a dry suit and you swim across. Another picture of us, I had a rope where I attached it to the sled to bring the sled across, and you just sort of backstroke. It wouldn't support our weight, so we just have to swim across. And then you pull off the dry suit. As soon as you get out of the water, it pretty much freezes because it's -40, and you just brush off all the ice off the dry suit, and you put it in the sled and start moving again. What can we do? Well, there's a lot we can do. The Hawaiian legislature has approved a bill requiring Hawaii to generate 100% of its electricity from renewables by 2045. I think they should try to do it till 2030. That's what the UN Council was talking about about 2 weeks ago. Their goal is 2030. Hawaii's making try to do it by 2045. Morocco has wind farms. There's also off of the coast of England, they got some wind farms that are happening, and you know, can power 470,000 homes. There's huge wind farms, you know, in the U.S. It's climbing rapidly, and also there's also huge increase in clean jobs. So you guys, I think this is the industry that you guys should be getting into, and it just shows the spike. Even in 2012 of all the solar installations that's happening. They had to wait a little bit with the battery stuff, but you know, in Africa, they're actually putting up, or I'm sorry, Bangladesh, they have little solar panels for each home. And so you can, and they're going up at a rate of 1 per minute. Huge solar farms here, and I'm not sure where this is. Oh, it's in Pakistan. Pakistan is huge in solar. You know, they're putting up these huge, Bangladesh and Pakistan are putting up huge solar farms. This is Chile. This is Honduras. You know, all these small companies see that there's money in it. Also, you got the battery that Tesla's putting out, the Powerwall for homes. And this is our blue planet again. And here's me in my penguin suit. So I'm going to take a couple questions now that you guys might have, and then I have a few questions that some of the people have sent me too. So, but if anybody has any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them. Yes?
Can you please tell the class, because some weren't here at the very beginning, what you're doing in Paris in a couple of weeks?
Well, I go around, I do talks. A lot of them are climate focused because of my background. I'm really a data collector. I go and I collect data. I'm not a scientist, but I truly have seen what's going on, especially in the Arctic. The Antarctic, I'm not completely convinced. I see water temperatures changing by probably 1 degree. Which is changing krill populations, which is changing wildlife movement. All the krill is relying on, or all the wildlife is relying on krill up on down in Antarctica. So I'm seeing differences that haven't been noticed before. I'm seeing penguins not going back to the same place. They always go back to the same place to breed. They got their mates for life. I'm seeing differences with that. But the Arctic, Greenland, Iceland, Svalbard, northern Canada, Alaska, all of Siberia, and there's not a lot of population around Siberia, and not a lot of research has been going on there, but that's really where the impact is happening. Inuit tribes are having to change their whole focus on their way of life. And so I'm off to Paris to a thing called Road to Paris, and all the world leaders are meeting the last week in November and the first week in December, and try to come up with a climate solution. It's basically a big think tank with all our leaders, and hopefully we can come up with some sort of resolution or at least some rules. We tried to do it a few years back in Kyoto, and Kyoto Protocol, which most of the European nations saw that was something that they needed to do. A lot of there's Norway and Germany and Holland are all on the forefront of this. They've been using tons of renewables and on that track. China is now starting to do a lot more renewables, clean energy. They're one of the biggest coal burners on our planet. I'm actually seeing soot up at the North Pole from China. So You know, they see that there's money in it. India is a huge country that really needs to change their ways with more renewable energy and cleaner energy. So I will talk to, on a panel, some of the world leaders, and hopefully we come up with some sort of plan, hopefully in a more of an aggressive plan, especially the US. I'm anxious to see what's going to happen next year with our election, just with the powers that be who's running our company. There's been a few things. I think the Obama administration has really done some nice things in this last 8 months to really showcase that he is a climate leader, but there are a few things that he's done that I haven't agreed with that was a little bit contradictory as well. But luckily the pipeline didn't go through. They ended up pulling it anyway. So, yeah, I go around. I was in Miami a couple weeks ago at a climate convention doing some talks. I go to talks around about Shackleton and, you know, about my expedition. So it's not just that, but I am passionate about our climate, and I do think we need to do something now. And you know, it's not going to be in my lifetime, but it's your lifetime and your kids' lifetime that really is going to be impactful. And you know, we are destroying our planet. So, question? Go ahead.
Just on your question on your Explorer, is there any like contingency plans or backup plans just in case something goes wrong? Or?
You know, I talked to the scientists, and they think, you mean contingency plan with climate change, or on my expeditions?
Yeah, your expedition.
Oh well, there's always a plan for sure. You mean if you fell in or something like that, or something would go wrong?
Yeah,
I mean, there's definitely a plan in place that we have depending on the environment that I'm in, whether I'm on the Arctic Ocean. There's protocol that we use, and there's sat phones, and we talk about that, and extraction methods. I've fallen in before. I had to climb in all the way on the other side. So what happened is I was 3/4 of the way across the lead, and I end up falling in. I have skis on. I don't want to lose my skis. So I basically on the ice here, and I take my poles and I break the ice and go back to the client. I was like, I only had to go 3 feet and I'd be on the other side, but it would be no good for me to be on the other side and him over here and I'm there. So I break the ice and go back that way toward the client. As soon as I got out of the water, I took my skis off or tried to get them off. They started freezing. The boots froze to the binding system that I had. And I rolled in the snow to try to absorb all the water if I could. And then I immediately set up a tent. I ran around the tent about 140 times to try to generate heat. I put him in the tent and turned on the stove, peeled off my clothes, I had some tent clothes that I bring, and I put those on, and I tried to dry the mitts and the boots. Those were the things I was gonna need that was gonna make me stay warm and safe for the rest of the trip. So I spent about 15 hours drying the liners of the boots over the stove, and the mitts, try to dry them out. And it was funny because the jacket was it looked like body armor. It was just sitting in the vestibule of the tent when I took it off, and because it was all frozen and just was like hanging there, wouldn't even roll up or anything. So, but that was, you know, I spent 15 hours drying all of my stuff, and luckily I'd brought enough fuel to have that contingency plan, you know, because if I'm usually, you know, down to the wire with enough fuel, enough food for survival. And if I know that I'm running out of food and we have 20 days left, it's really a simple equation. I know in the first week whether we're going to make it or not because I have this much food, this much fuel, and this much distance to get. So if I don't get 10.2 nautical miles today and every day after that, we're not going to make it. And the equation changes if I don't get that. And obviously your sled's going to get lighter and you're going to move faster because you're going to get fitter and that kind of thing. But you have to think about that, you know, and you know whether you're going to make it or not. So, yeah, I've come across a 75-pound meteorite that's probably worth over, you know, $50 million. And I see it right there. And the last thing I want to do is put it in my sled and haul 75 pounds across the Antarctic continent. So, and you know it's a meteorite because it's a white surface. There's probably meteorites right out here in the hills here, but you walk by them and it's just a rock, you know? So what happens is you end up cruising and it's a white surface. If it's not a moraine area, you see a black rock on the ice and you can almost guarantee it's a meteorite. So. Go ahead.
What do you do as far as carbon offsets go? Because it's really these places
Great
that you're going
question.
are great.
And that's one of the questions someone asked me. How do you justify going there and bringing these people and using the carbon footprint? Because I'm flying and using huge amounts of carbon to fly these places. I do a couple things. I have a carbon offset company, okay? I also feel that I'm making everybody ambassadors for these places to preserve and protect, okay? And that's my biggest thing, is to teach people on these trips to showcase what's happening and what's going on. And hopefully they become ambassadors for these places. So I do feel it's an impact. I try to be as stealth as possible. I use a lot of sailboats and try to have the least carbon footprint that we can, but I'm guilty of it. You know, I am. I mean, I drive a hybrid, you know, I mean, that doesn't do anything. That only curbs my gas a little bit. I still got to drive up in Lake Tahoe and with 3 feet of snow and stuff like that. So we all have to do our part. You know, I think we take the small steps and to really make a difference. I think you contact your local representative, whoever we put in office, and say, here's some plan that I really want you guys to work on, making our government a lot more clean and renewable. I mean, the government and the armed forces are one of the biggest polluters on the planet, you know. So yeah, I have a little bit of issue with it, but I feel that my work offsets it.
Sort of an offbeat question, but how did the blind guy, is there a story behind the blind guy choosing a deaf guy?
They've been doing some other stuff together. He holds all kinds of records. He flew an ultralight from London to Sydney, and he's done the marathon to Sabul. That's 7 marathons in 7 days and across the Sahara. He's done, I don't know, he's done a bunch of stuff, and he always does it with John, and it's his sight guide, so, and he just happens to be deaf. And there's a couple times he's in the tent and he's trying to get out of the tent, he's stepping on the stove and I'm yelling at him and he can't hear me.
Just happened to notice, like, on most of your pictures, you had, you got patches like World Wildlife Foundation and stuff. Couldn't help noticing on one of them you had a Ben & Jerry's patch. What was their interest in here?
I actually worked with Ben & Jerry's on a couple different projects. They did a climate change college in Greenland, and I instigated that. It was sort of an idea that I had to educate youth about our planet, and they came and we went to Greenland and I took some students. Unfortunately, Ben & Jerry didn't take it on here in the United States. They ended up doing it in the UK and Holland, and my partner ended up running most of it, but it was my original idea. But it's okay. I mean, as long as they're educating people. I don't know why they didn't do it in the States. It was maybe because the demographic is not what they were trying to build their brand a little bit more in the UK and Holland. But I've worked with them on several projects. In fact, they're backing something else right now, another climate change thing I read recently. I can't recall though. But yeah, you find sponsors that believe in what your goal. And I work with European Satellite Agency. I worked with a bunch of different, Alfred Wenger Institute in Germany. I work with a lot of climate change scientists. In fact, a lot of the time, we'll bring back data, and then I talk to him because I want to be able to talk to you guys articulately about what's happening. And so I want to be able to know the right information, and it is fairly complex, as you know, and you're learning.
So what led you to, doing these expeditions where you're just like a really hardcore skier here and you wanted to?
No, I honestly wanted to go climb and ski Vinson, which is the highest peak in Antarctica, 16,077 feet. I put a team together. Before that, I went to Chamonix and lived for a couple springs, and Chamonix is the birthplace of ski mountaineering or climbing, and so I was like blown away by, I'm climbing ice with skis on my back, and like, oh, we're gonna ski this too. How are you gonna ski it? And we set up an anchor and we rappel that section and then ski on and keep on going, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And so I've done a bunch of stuff up in Alaska in the early 90s, and usually in helicopters, and sort of got over that and about 95, I said I just wanted to get into ski touring and ski mountaineering, and I did. And but in 99, I wanted to go do the first ski and snowboard descent of Vincent Massif, and what I didn't realize is I really fell in love with the continent. And the first moment that I stepped foot on the ice runway, and it was minus 40 and blowing 40 miles an hour, and there was like crystals in the air and from the ice, and it was just it blew me away. And then I walked about 100 meters, and there was a tent city and a guy making crepes and strawberries at 4 in the morning, you know, and I was like, where am I, you know? And we had a great, successful trip skiing, Vincent, and with a great bunch of friends. And that really got me involved, and I wanted to see more of Antarctica, and nothing lives in the interior, so I was in the interior for that one. And then 2 months later, I chartered a Russian research vessel, went down to the Antarctic Peninsula, explored down there, and that was like full of wildlife, you know, millions of penguins and seals and whales, and blew me away. And this diversity of like so much wildlife and so much just really no wildlife, you know, just the contrast of the beauty of the interior and the beauty of the peninsula. I wanted to learn more. And so I was dumb enough I didn't really know what I was getting into when I started my trip with Miles and John across with the blind guy and deaf guy. But, you know, I think you learn a lot about yourself, because it's sort of like going on a long run. You have a lot of time for meditation and thinking about things, but it's pretty remarkable if you do it for 62 days, you know, how you can really, I almost came back almost energized and new ideas for trips and expeditions and changing my life and doing things. I mean, it's pretty remarkable how you can really be ultra focused when you go out and do these type of things.
Can you get some of the written questions, please? Especially
Yeah.
the woman who's accepting a scholarship and couldn't be here.
Yes, okay. Given my field work in both Arctic and Antarctic, I wish I could attend Doug Staup's seminar. Here's my question for Doug. And it has a lot to do with the role of tourism in raising awareness to climate change in the polar region. Should we try to make these regions more accessible to visitors, or protect them to reduce direct environmental damage from humans and ship traffic? My answer to that is there is tourism board. Antarctic Treaty will be up in 2041, and that is the year where all the countries that have bases there will decide what we do with it. There's all kinds of natural resources that we could definitely exploit if necessary. I want to keep it clean and pristine. I want to make it a world park. That's my goal, is to try to get a movement to make it a world park for just exploration and also for science. And I think by bringing people there, I think the Antarctic Tourism Board maintains that they try to keep it safe within a reason. They only allow so many boats. I have to do all kinds of permits and protocol to make sure. I'm an American company, so I go through the EPA, which are probably one of the biggest polluters. And that's one of my pet peeves too. Why do we have all these scientific bases in Antarctica they basically have 6 months of sun, and they all have 365 days of wind, and they don't use any of it? You know, you're pulling 432 flights in from McMurdo Sound into the South Pole full of fuel. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And they don't leave with any of their waste. They just dug a big hole. And they'll give me a hard time if I'm on a climbing expedition in Queen Maud Land and I'm with 3 people and like, what are you gonna do? You need to bring everything out. Okay, I'll do that. But what are you doing? You know, so these are the same people I'm actually talking to about it. And, you know, I'm working on a blog on the Huffington Post right now, and I'm questioning whether I should try to exploit some of these things, because I think people should know, but they're in charge of letting me go. They're like the gatekeepers. So who knows? I think I might just go for it and press the button and go ahead and do it. But I know a lot about what's going on in some of these remote areas that a lot of people don't see.
So, given your experience working with the tourism board down there, what is the challenge of working in a place like Antarctica, where there's no one country with total jurisdictional power or control over it? You know, like when you look at, for example, Palau or Rapa Nui more recently with Chile, their decision to eliminate industrial line fishing in their EEZs, that's a simple thing, because it's at most a bilateral or maybe a multilateral agreement that they achieve with other countries. But in Antarctica, there's no one power down there. So what's the challenge with working in that?
Well, I think that goes back to every bureaucratic government too. I mean, I operate a base in the interior of Antarctica and worked with Adventure Network International, and we had a completely solar, wind, and the only thing we left was gray water. And this was a huge base that the second largest air operator next to the US government. And we probably had over 350 visitors every summer, our winter, their summer. And we would bring all the waste back, even our feces and urine and everything, and all our trash. You get to Chile, they just dump it right in the ocean. You know, it's like, okay, we brought it all the way back, let's do something with it, and then you end up, because it's sort of out of sight, out of mind there, you know. But I think the Antarctic Tourism Board is really on the tourism part. They want to maintain that you're not stressing the wildlife, so there's only so many people that can go visit each penguin rookery, known penguin rookery. They can only have so many boats. There is 14,000 to 20,000 people going there every summer, Antarctic summer. So there is a lot of people going down there. That if you were on a big cruise ship with 3,000 people, no one could go ashore. So it's more the small boat operators where they only allow 100 people at one time to go to any one location. For my trips, it's not an issue because we have 100 skiers, but we're going places where no one's ever been to before. And we probably have 4 people that want to go check out the penguin rookery that everybody else goes to. We're just skiing down to all the other penguins that no one goes to. So I'm one of the cleanest people. On another front, those boats usually go to 2 or 3 stops a day. I go to 1. So I'm cutting back on fuel costs, so I don't use as much fuel. But we use a lot of Zodiac fuel, which is the rubber Zodiac boats that we cruise around in because we're going all over the place. But you know, we don't go to the bathroom on shore. We make sure we're not eating on shore. We're not sure we're putting any trash. All we leave is set of ski tracks, and that's our sort of motto and what we believe in. And we make sure that all the clients know that and make sure that we follow all those rules. So I think, have I seen an impact of people there? Not really. I mean, I think there's more impact with the water temperature changing than there is with people, to be honest with you. But there's no sign of human beings in any of the penguin rookeries or anything. You might see a footprint in some mud or something like that. But when I go down, there's usually pretty good snowfall around, so it's pretty uneventful. You wouldn't think that anybody was even there. And I usually go early in the season too. I'm usually one of the first boats down there. And I like that for a reason, because there isn't a lot of traffic down there. There's probably only 2 or 3 other boats that are there. And I need to be able to move around. Say if I want to go skiing in this one area and all the ice conditions have brought the ice in and I can't get ashore safely, I need to have plan B, C, D, and E. Goes back to what you were saying. You know, so I have to be up at 4 in the morning with the captain. If I got up at 7 o'clock and we've been hanging out outside where we couldn't get in through the ice, captain's like, I didn't know where you want me to go. I have to be proactive within that decision making to make sure that we're at 7 o'clock, everybody gets up and we're off going skiing somewhere. So anyway, another question. Okay. Over the years, you've been doing these sorts of adventures. How have technological developments changed the lifestyle you lead while in the backcountry? Are there gadgets you can imagine that you wish someday would make? Any issues that are perpetual problems that seem like they should have relatively straightforward solutions? Well, I mean, I showed one thing. I think it was the Avitech was a good example of that. You know, technology is actually moving forward with analyzing snowpack and that kind of thing. I mean, I've lost numerous friends to avalanches, and knock on wood, I love the mountains. I love to travel in the mountains. I think we're very lucky here in the Sierra Nevada mountains where we get a type of snow that's maritime, which means it has a lot of moisture in it. So usually after about 24 hours, it solidifies pretty in a very bonding way. But you can't get complacent about it and plan on, okay, it's going to be good because it's in the Sierra Nevadas, and just sort of like, okay, no big deal. You really still check it. I dig pits 4 or 5 times when I'm climbing terrain that hasn't been skied. I listen to, I don't have headphones on, and I'm not just listening to music as I'm going up. I listen to the mountains. I listen to the snow. I listen to my environment and try to be in touch with my environment to make good decisions to mitigate risk. So all those things are incorporated within my decision making, and I have no problem turning around.
What's the Antarctic winter like? Does anybody go there during that time?
Yeah, Antarctic winter is brutal. It's dark 24/7. Temperatures get down to -70. I haven't been there in the winter. So there is scientists that work there. There's probably 1,000 people, American scientists that work at McMurdo. There's 52 scientists that work at the South Pole. In contrast, in the summer, there's 256 people working there in the summer months. And the winter guys are probably drinking coffee all day and going crazy because they got these huge Hubble telescopes, and it's a perfect environment because they're looking into the winter sky. It's dark. There's no water vapor because you're at 9,000 feet. And it's usually clear. And you got this high-powered telescope looking back to 860 million years past the Big Bang Theory and discovering a galaxy every day. So they're probably sitting there sipping coffee going, Yahoo! Loving life. And so they're doing some cool work. I mean, I'm sure they're not outside for very long. They even have transportation, like vans and stuff that they keep running the whole winter. They never even turn them off. And they just run them back from the main, living quarters out to the telescope and back. It's really interesting, the buildings and the size of the buildings. There's no real, when you're skiing to the pole, you don't really see a pole. You see these buildings from sometimes 2 and 3 days before you even get there. But there's no reference point. You see these like objects in the horizon, but it's not like there's a car or a big tractor or anything to have a reference point. So you just keep on skiing for, 48 hours or whatever, and they just seem to not get any bigger. And because they're on stilts, and they did build a nice base there. I just wish they would have used some renewables. Lots of fuel to run that base. And it's a really remote place to get it there, so it's expensive. And the reason they made that decision was because of government contracts, and they were all oil-based government contracts. So let's make sure we run fuel there.